And interestingly, I can tell you, oh, God. Yeah, I can tell you. In 2012, the U.S., there were protests, there were things that were going on in Syria, but the president said, okay, we'll send in the CIA to overthrow the government in Syria. And if anyone is wondering, we do this dozens of times, so don't have any illusion that this is unusual. It is the job, the terms of reference of the CIA to overthrow governments in other countries. I don't approve.
Wow. And I mean, like, wow. I'm shocked. If you think that those coups that have taken place over the world just popped up out of nowhere, this will give you more insight in 20 minutes than you may have heard in the last 20 years. And you're hearing this straight from someone who's actually been a part of the system that carried it out. Like the coups that have happened all over Africa. They're the main, treading point for this. But then you get somebody who gets out there and blows that whistle. Yep, did it. It's been happening forever. Tucker Carlson had Jeffrey Sachs on his show, and let me lay the foundation of who's talking here. It's not some half-rate guessing game. To put into perspective of Sachs' rankings, if anyone remembers the fall of the Soviet Union, Sachs was with the Soviet president the day the Soviet Union fell. He was there. That's how important he is. That's how much he knows. Take a quick listen to this.
Is it not? Am I missing something?
No, you're not missing anything. And the fact of the matter is, I was an advisor to Gorbachev in 1990-91. I got to watch close up. I was an advisor to President Yeltsin in 1991, 1992. It's literally true. As weird as this sounds, maybe not to you, you're about the one person for whom it's not weird. I sat in the Kremlin, sitting across from Yeltsin the day the Soviet Union ended. And Yeltsin came from the back of the room in one of these giant Kremlin rooms.
Yes.
And walked across the long room and sat down right in front of me and said, "Gentlemen, I want to tell you the Soviet Union is over."
That's incredible.
Like that. And then he pointed to the back door. He said, "Do you know who is in that room over there? It's the leaders of the Soviet military, and they have just agreed to the dissolution of the Soviet Union." And that was the first words I heard out of his mouth, sitting directly across from me.
You see, this man has been around, and he's just exposed the deep state of the United States government, from the coup that took place in Ukraine that planted Zelensky for the West, for the coups in Africa that were carried out and destabilized the countries on that continent, even to what I never knew took place, the coup in America with the assassination of John F. Kennedy around the same time Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. Remember that. This was a 2-hour interview, and I suggest anyone who wanted to get the full picture of it has to go check it out. Check out the whole interview. It's worth the watch. Tucker Carlson Show. TuckerCarlson.com. But for you, I've pieced this together in bits of Sachs' talking points about the CIA's role in developing coups, and hopefully this can answer a lot of unanswered questions. I'll have to stop it on occasion along the way due to copyright policies and stuff like that. But grab a drink and we'll go over this together. One love. Cheers.
It's all part of this design, all spelled out, all quite explicit. We're surrounding Russia. In 2007, President Putin gave a very clear speech at the Munich Security Conference. Very powerful, very correct, very frustrated, where he said, "Gentlemen, you told us in 1990 NATO would never enlarge. That was the promise made to President Gorbachev, and it was the promise made to President Yeltsin. And you cheated."
Но что же происходит в это же самое время? А в это самое время в Болгарии и Румынии появляются так называемые легкие американские передовые базы по 5000 штыков в каждой. Получается, что НАТО выдвигает свои передовые силы к нашим государственным границам. А мы, строго выполняя договор, никак не реагируем на эти действия. Думаю, очевидно, процесс натовского расширения не имеет никакого отношения к модернизации самого Альянса или к обеспечению безопасности в Европе. Наоборот, это серьезно провоцирующий фактор, снижающий уровень взаимного доверия. И у нас есть справедливое право откровенно спросить, против кого это расширение.
And you repeatedly cheated. And you don't even admit that you said this, but it's all plainly documented.
You like that? How Putin just called him out right there. This was 2007. Putin was a kid. Look at him in that picture. I mean, he's just a baby. But he called him out. He called out the West back in 2007. So this isn't a new thing.
By the way, James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward. And NATO won't move 1 inch eastward, Mr. President. Repeated so many times in many documents, many statements by the NATO Secretary General, by the U.S. Secretary of State, by the German Chancellor. Back to 2007, Putin gives this speech, and he says, stop. Don't even think about Ukraine. This is our 2,100-kilometer border. This is absolutely part of the integrated economy of this region. Don't even think about it. Ukraine is really a red line. Don't do it. It's not just Putin. It's not just Putin's government. It's the entire political class of Russia. Bush Jr. says to them, no, it's okay. Don't worry. I hear you about Ukraine. And then he goes off for the Christmas holidays and comes back, whether it's Cheney, whether it's Bush, whatever it is, says, NATO's going to enlarge to Ukraine.
So basically, we lied. It's nothing new. The United States lies, even on contracts, even on deals. What do you think? NATO's going to enlarge to Ukraine. And the Europeans are shocked, pissed. And this was 2008. And the Europeans, Chancellor Merkel, the French president, all of them, George, don't do this. Don't do this. This is extraordinarily dangerous. This is really provocative. We don't really need or want NATO right up to the Russian border. Putin was there the next day in Bucharest saying, don't do this. This is completely reckless. Essentially, this is our fundamental red line. Do not do this. The U.S. can't hear any of this. This is our biggest problem of all, because the neocons who have run the show for 30 years believe the U.S. can do whatever it wants. This is the most fundamental point to understand about U.S. foreign policy. They're wrong. They keep screwing up. They keep getting us into trillion-dollar-plus wars. They keep killing a lot of people. But their basic belief is the U.S. is the only superpower. It's the unipolar power, and we can do what we want. So they could not hear Putin. Even that moment, they couldn't hear the rest of the Europeans. What goes awry? The Ukrainians don't want NATO enlargement. The Ukrainians don't want it. Victoria Nuland famously passing around the cookies, but it was much, much more than the cookies, I can tell you. And so the U.S. conspired with a Ukrainian right to overthrow Yanukovych, and there was a violent overthrow in the third week of February of 2014. Now, I don't know how many of you all have been here and how long you've been on this channel, but I did a bit not long ago on Victoria Nuland and her trip to Africa, and I kind of threw a little out there. Watch out for this woman. She's kind of been around some coups and some takeovers. Well, this is when 2014 Victoria Nuland was responsible for overthrowing the president then of Ukraine. It was like a coup, and getting him out of there because he didn't want the NATO thing. He wanted just Russia, to play friends, side by side, be friends. And Victoria Nuland went over there and kind of just ruptured the whole thing. Thank God she just retired the other day too, but we'll continue to go. But just to let you know, the coup in Ukraine was done by the United States.
of 2014. That's when this war started. This war didn't even start in 2022. It started in 2014. That was the outbreak of the war, was a violent coup that overthrew a Ukrainian president that wanted neutrality. When he was violently overthrown and his security people told him, you're going to get killed. And so he flew to Kharkiv and then flew onward to Russia that day. The U.S. immediately, in a nanosecond, recognized the new government. Oh, this is a coup. This is how the CIA does its regime change operations. So this is when the war starts. Putin's understanding, completely correct in this moment, was, I'm not letting NATO take my naval fleet and my naval base in Crimea. Are you kidding? Just one absolutely naive idea after another. But you might ask me, how can they have such naive ideas?
Well, that was my question, yes.
And I'm sorry to put words in your mouth, but I would say, well, I'm old enough to remember Vietnam. I'm old enough to remember trying to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. I'm old enough to remember Libya. I'm old enough to remember Afghanistan. We screw up nonstop. This is not clever. I think this is a big, deep project of the security apparatus that goes back 30 years. I think the CIA continues to be a driving force.
Who are the neocons? How would you describe them? What is a neocon?
You know, there he says he thinks it's a big, deep apparatus that goes back 30 years. I think it goes back further than that. Let me know what you think. I think it goes way back further than that. He actually, in the whole interview, he goes back 180 years.
Who are the neocons? How would you describe them? What is a neocon?
A neocon is a group of true believers starting that really rose to force in the last years of Bush Sr. It was Cheney, Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, but it became absolutely bipartisan. Victoria Nuland is kind of the ultimate.
Yes.
Her husband,
Bob Kagan.
Robert Kagan, is kind of the public intellectual of the neocons. I mean, he is.
I know Bob well.
Yes.
He's an idiot.
We've had 13 years of war in Syria, hundreds of thousands dead.
Destroyed the country.
Of course, destroyed the country. And who's president? Bashar al-Assad. And interestingly, I can tell you, oh, God. Yeah, I can tell you. In 2012, the U.S., there were protests, there were things that were going on in Syria, but the president said, okay, we'll send in the CIA to overthrow the government in Syria. And if anyone is wondering, we do this dozens of times, so don't have any illusion that this is unusual. It is the job, the terms of reference of the CIA to overthrow governments in other countries. I don't approve. I think it leads to war, destruction. It hasn't passed Putin's notice that that's the job of the CIA, so it's another reason he doesn't exactly want the U.S. on his border and so forth. Okay, so we start arming the jihadists, crazy things in Syria. Yeah, I can say it. I'm just thinking because... and the U.S. says Assad must go. So the UN starts a diplomatic process to try to find peace, which is the job of the UN. It's not to implement U.S. regime change. It's to try to find peace.
Yeah, once again, you got to stop it again. Copyright issues here. Don't want to run into trouble. But I also want to mention, you hear Russia and Putin talking a lot. Whenever you hear Putin talk about there are believers out there who have a certain agenda going on. When he's talking about neocons, Putin, he uses the word believers a lot. So next time you might hear that from, the gentleman, anybody, any leader out there, when they say the United States and they're believers, they're talking about the neocons and the deep state. So just to get that information across, hopefully that helps. Just check it out.
So the UN succeeds in getting all of the parties to agree to a peace agreement, except one, the U.S. So the idea that you couldn't find peace, you couldn't find all these different factions in Syria. There was an agreement reached, but there was one obstacle to the agreement, and the obstacle was the U.S. said on the first day of this agreement, Assad must go, and the response was, why don't you have it a process? There'll be in 2 years an election or 3 years. Don't overthrow the government the first day. We have all this in place. And Obama, well, I don't know if it's Obama, probably Hillary, but whatever, said no. So that's why there was no agreement.
But what was the motive? Like, why would you want to overthrow Bashar al-Assad?
Very strange. I've never heard an absolute intelligent reason for this. Believe me, their idea is, we can do it. Why not? I don't know. Whoever gave that order knew nothing about Syria. That I can guarantee you.
But the downstream effects of that were horrifying.
Well, unbelievable.
We created ISIS, so...
Yeah, but we probably created ISIS pretty directly because we funded jihadists all along the way. That's our story since 1979, actually.
I find it interesting there, especially when you see all these coups come out of nowhere, fully armed, fully weaponized, and ready to take over the presidency, take his seat, go take his spot. Where do they get the weapons? Well, most of the time, it's the Americans, apparently. What I would also like to say, maybe, this is my opinion on all this. It's just an opinion, ladies and gentlemen. There are coups out there that, like Burkina Faso, Niger, those coups where the people actually have taken over. So we don't want to get those mixed up. But the people can tell. The people know. The people in Africa, they know, or around the world, they know when a coup was done by the United States, or whether it was done by actually their people who were on the right side of things, on their side of things for their interest. The people know. The American government thinks people are stupid. Anyway, we'll keep going.
Yes.
They're not clever. They're not honest. They're not transparent. They are arrogant to the hilt. And they don't talk to anybody else, including to us, the American people, including to Congress, including to counterparts in other countries. And it gets you into trouble when you're so flippant and flagrant. Because remember, what was happening in Syria, they did exactly the same thing in Libya. And you look at Libya, they decided to take out Gaddafi. Why? No one really knows.
He was cooperating with us at that point.
There are 100 theories. The fact that there are 100 theories shows that the whole thing was bullshit, to use a technical diplomatic term. You cannot even know right now why. What you know is that they misused a UN Security Council resolution to protect the people of Benghazi to launch a months-long NATO aerial bombardment of Libya until they brought down the government, unleashed war in Africa for the next 13 years until today, which is still roiling all of the countries of the region. Because what you can't do, Tucker, is look and say, my God, we had a geopolitical reason to do this. This was really part of American security. We really needed to overthrow Assad. We really needed to take out Gaddafi, because if we didn't do that, something else would happen. You cannot even concoct a crazy narrative ex post that explains that. So these are not deeply explicable facts.
But the pattern is recognizable immediately. Here you have a country with unchallenged power, starting wars for not any obvious reason all over the world. When was the last time an empire did that?
The British. That was the last time. I think we learned everything from the British. So we have military bases in, I would say, 80 countries probably, something like that. Of course, the count is not public, so people put together their own lists. We have about 750 military bases around the world. Each of those places has a neighborhood.
Now, as we're seeing Africa kicking out all of these military bases on the continent. Africa's kicking in the United States and French military's out. Get out. This is why. Because they know exactly what's going on when the United States has a military base in there. It's because they want to expand and expand and expand. 750 military bases around the world? That's, dang, bro. World domination. That's really it. I mean, let me know what you think.
Each of those places has a neighborhood. Each of those places has the next door, which, we don't have a base there. We better have a base there. We're not threatened by Russia. We are not threatened by Russia. And Ukraine being neutral is not a threat to U.S. security. It builds U.S. security, period. From my point of view, the U.S. resents that there is a country of 11 time zones, and it's so big that it is on its face a denial of U.S. global hegemony.
How influential is the CIA in the operations of the U.S. government?
Definitely in many, many places, it is the instrument of regime change.
Yes.
And the U.S. is the only country in the world that relies on regime change as, I would say, the lead foreign policy instrument. In other words, most countries, virtually any small country, any middle power country, when it doesn't like another country, it either has to deal with it or it comes begging to the United States to take out that country. And we are the country that makes a living by overthrowing other governments. It almost always ends in disaster, in bloodshed, in continued instability. Being a private army or a hidden force that overthrows governments, that stokes unrest, that puts people in power, that runs covert operations, I'm against it.
So if a big part of the CIA's job is taking down leaders of foreign countries, how long before it does that here in the United States? I mean, it doesn't seem unlikely that, why wouldn't they do that here?
Now, I don't know if many of you have caught the video that I put out about a month ago where they actually did that to the African Freedom Association. They're doing it here. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, probably 61 years ago was their first run at this with President Kennedy. From, I think it's best guess, not sure, but best guess that this was at least maybe rogue CIA or maybe official CIA, right, or maybe compartmentalized CIA operation. It was clearly someone's operation, not Lee Harvey Oswald's.
That's
from
pretty obvious.
All we know. And all of the evidence points in that direction. It used to be said, why is the United States the only country in the world that's never had a coup? And the answer was, well, we're the only country that doesn't have a U.S. embassy.
Well, of course, we've had a coup. I mean, murdering the president is a coup.
But we probably had a coup in broad daylight on November 22nd, 1963. And we never quite got over it. And we never looked into it. On the contrary, we covered it up from the beginning. And drip by drip, evidence comes, including the most recent evidence that magic bullet, which was one of the justifications of the absurd account of a lone gunman, was also debunked by the, I think now 88-year-old Secret Service agent who said, I actually put that bullet from the back of Kennedy's seat in the limousine on the stretcher at Parkland Hospital. Most likely it was a government coup in broad daylight with a tremendous amount of evidence that it was a conspiracy at a high level, and yet it passed for the last 61 years without any official practical note of that fact.
Well, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Speak and See Show. I ask you to like, subscribe, and click that notification button so when I get this kind of information out, you can get information in. And I just wanted to say that we've heard it before, but coming from a man of this depth, I don't know if we'd call him a whistleblower here, but he's right there on the cusp of things. But I do this because I want this world, I want to be on the right side of history. And I know that Africa is a continent, the people on Africa know this information. They do. You know it. You know it. I'm not probably giving you any information that you didn't know already. I see it in the comments below all the time, and I'm thinking, if they're right. I know they're right, but I've never really, if we could just get that nail in the coffin on this one, and I think this is pretty dang close, hearing it from such a top advisor, somebody who's been there, done that, and now it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's known now. This is it. So keep your eyes open. That's why we do it. Keep your eyes open. We want to see this world as a one love, and there's all this other flossy, Nazi, and hillbillification crap of the United States government and the governments out there, the neocolonialists and the neocons, as they would say. We like to see an end to it. That's all. We're not asking much. But let me know what you think about this. Please leave your comments below. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. We're all one family here. And again, I do not put my trust in governments. Just don't. I put my trust in the one true Savior, Jesus Christ, who, through him, all things are possible. And I know that this world becoming a better place is possible because we have God on our side. Amen. Hopefully this information does get out there and exposes these kind of things to the world. Because we got to get this nonsense stopped. Don't you think? I'm done. I'm tired of it. Just tired of it. We've had enough. And let me know what you think. I'll talk to you all later. See you on the next one. Love you all. One love. Bye-bye.